Welcome to Visual Anthology. In this training video, we'll be covering the Overstock Returns area, or Return Invoices, also known as RI. This is a way for you to build a list of items that you're possibly going to ship back to your vendors for some credit. It's also an area that you can just use to help build a list of items, maybe through the generation tool, to decide, should these items go or should they perhaps be stuck into a bargain bin situation as well. Basically just a tool to help you clean up your inventory. This video is going to be done in version 5.16.097. And I'm going to hit a few different areas for you today. I wanted to start out with hitting the highlights of what pieces of information in inventory you might use to determine should the item stay or should it go. Also some basic reports that you might use as well to help you make that determination. I'll also cover the Overstock Return screen, or the RI screen, to show you some basics such as creating a new one, adding line items, perhaps deleting line items if you've gotten more than what you wanted from, say, a generation tool. Basic printing information, that kind of detail. And then I'll also hit the Overstock generation tool as well. That's a tool that allows you to kind of get a list of suggested returns so you can decide should those items stay or should they go. And now I might break this down into maybe 2 or 3 small little chapters. We'll see what it breaks down into. But why don't we get started with going over some of the basic information in the inventory. So under Master Files, Inventory, here we have our inventory, lots of different titles in here, of course. And in the List tab, like we're on right now, there's your On Hand tab or column, your On Order column, things like Last Sold, Create Date, First Received, Pub Date, all sorts of pieces of information. All good, useful details for when you're trying to decide if an item should stay or should go. Also to the far right on the List tab are these Sold Last Week, Last Month, Last Year, and so forth columns. Now it is important for you to understand exactly how we calculate these last year and this year numbers. Know that if you're looking in, say, the online help system here under Master Files and then Inventory Master File, we define exactly what constitutes a sold this week number, sold this year versus last year, and so forth. This year means the last 12 months, not the last calendar year, such as 2007. The last year means the previous 12 months before that. So just be clear on those definitions when you're trying to decide what those mean for you. Now, of course, that's the List tab. There's, of course, all sorts of information when you're looking at the Details tab of a particular inventory item, such as when's your last receipt, when was it created in the inventory, when was it published, first received, last sold, again, those sold last week, last month kind of information. Also important is this item even returnable normally or not? Is it a stock item or not? These are settings that you can change as you add an inventory item. Of course, you also have the Sales tab. Great quick snapshot of a place for you to look at to see, okay, we know we've sold 134 of this title over the life of the item that it's been in the store, but how did it do, say, in December 2007 versus October? So here you can see the last 12 months worth of sales for that item, and then also we show in the grid below items from this year versus last year. How well did that item do? Of course, there's also the purchasing and receiving history of the item. There are what other Overstock returns has this item perhaps been on. Any outstanding CBOs or customer back orders. Any book fair history. And then, of course, the Inventory History tab, which gives you sort of a summary by using the All box down here, what this item has done over time. So again, all good, useful pieces of information when you're trying to decide, is this an item that I need to keep or should it go? As far as what reports you can use, there are actually quite a few different options. One really good utility that is we're trying to get everybody to know about here is the query utility that is available from inventory and also customers and vendors as well. But in the actions menu of inventory, when you're on the list tab, you'll see this option called construct a query. This handy little utility allows you to basically run kind of like an advanced keyword search, where you're going to set in a series of filters or and statements. So you can basically put in some basic requirements that an item has to meet, so it'll show up in the screen once you run this query. Now in this case, let's say that we want to find anything that has more than 10 on hand, and perhaps has at least one on order, and maybe last year didn't sell, either any or didn't sell more than very few copies, and the last time it was received was this date and hasn't been sold since this date, and so forth. So you can set up these various multi-tiered or multiple and statements to restrict the results that you're going to get. Now you can also save this query so that you can use this from time to time. And in this case, I'm just going to run it though, but I'm going to make my settings just a little simpler so I can make sure I at least get some information back here. So right now I'm just going to worry about anything that's got an on hand of more than 10. So I'll say run, and no, I don't need to save this query right now. But what it does is it takes you back to the list tab with all those items that met that requirement that I put in this case on hand was greater than 10. And you can see further up at the top where we say the inventory module, we show you that you are in a query mode, and that further this wasn't one that we had saved. Now if I wanted to get out of this query mode, all I have to do is do a reset. But from here, I can start making my determination of should this item stay or should it go, using all those other different columns of information that I had shown earlier. And further, using the well-known multi-select option, I can do a shift-click on the first item that I want to highlight, or select rather, and then do another shift-click on the last one in the bunch that I want to highlight. So you can see now I have those 3 titles highlighted. I can also use the control-click method to sort of pick and choose. Maybe I don't want to get this one, so I'll deselect it by doing control click. So by using control click or shift click, depending on what I'm after, I can highlight a series of titles that have decided that they need to go to Overstock Return memo. So from here, I can do Alt F12, send to an RI. But for right now, I want to hit a few more of the reporting things, so we'll get back to that in a little bit. There are a couple of other reports that you might consider using. Of course, there's the stock check report, which really is just meant to give you a paper list of the titles, the section that they're in, and the count that you have on hand. You probably want a little more information than that when making a determination of should the item stay or go. The sales history report actually has a good, useful option on here called slow sellers. In fact, let me set up a date range here. We'll go back a little bit to, we'll just do the last couple of years here. So in the sales history report, once I've set my date range, I can do this option called slow sellers, which let's say I want to get a report of anything that sold, less than 5 copies in this date range that I specified. So I'll say show me the quantities. And the other option is to say show me anything that was in the bottom sellers, the bottom 10 items that sold the least. But for right now, we'll just go with anything that sold less than 5 copies. So I can show you a good example here. And let's preview that. So the first bunch that I see are items that were actually cash register returns. Now if I go a little further here, here's a bunch of items that didn't sell any in that date range that I specified. Now in the case of the Big Sleep title here, you can see that I have one on hand, but I haven't sold it in 2 years. Probably time to get rid of that item. Maybe, it just depends. Yeah, that's where you're going to make your own determinations on that. Let's go down a little further. So as we start scrolling through the pages here, we start seeing the items that only sold one copy in the date range that I specified. So that might be one report that I might use to help me decide, do I have a bunch of items that need to go? There are a few other reports that you might consider. There are lots of reports in here, so we encourage everybody to take a look and see what's out here. But one other report you might consider using is the publisher listing report. This is actually a really good one for when you've got, say, the rep coming in, and they're going to want to go over with you what kind of items that you might purchase from them. But it's also a good one to look at when you're just trying to get a snapshot of, well, how well have my items from that publisher done. So let's see if we get some results here. So here is a list of all my titles that were assigned to HarperCollins publisher that are in my inventory, and at least the first chunk are items that I don't have on hand, on order, and they've not been sold or received in a while. But let's scroll through perhaps and find a couple examples that might have some on hand. Like here we go. So the Last Days of Krypton, I have 3 on hand. The last time it sold was December 2007, and it was received in October 2007. So, and then in the last 12 months, I sold 9 copies of it. So, I might keep that item, I might not. But again, this is just a snapshot report for you to make those determinations on your own. That's about it for the various reports and pieces of information in the inventory. I'll probably break this down into a new little chapter here. We'll start covering the actual Overstock Returns screen here in a moment.